Sorry.
While in Madison, Nelson partnered with fellow meteorologist Terry Kelly in devising one of the first computer weather graphics systems for television. From 1979 through 1984, he installed TV weather computers at over 50 TV stations across the nation. He brought the first weather computer to Colorado in 1982 and trained legendary Denver weatherman Stormy
Oh, yeah.
Rotman on that system. In 1985, Mike and his family moved to St. Louis, Missouri, where he served as chief meteorologist at the local station until 1991. While there, he was a member of the American Meteorological Association Board of Broadcast Meteorology, approving candidates to receive the AMS seal of approval for television weathercasting. Mike has won 18 Emmy Awards for Outstanding Weather Anchor. In 2001, he was recognized by the Colorado Broadcasters Association as a Citizen of the Year for his volunteer work in Colorado schools. Mike enjoys sharing his knowledge of the weather with young and old, visiting over 50 schools, clubs, and service organizations each year. His tornado dance, are we going to see that? Is a much anticipated event. In his career, Mike has spoken to over 750,000 school children. Mike has also written two local bestsellers, the Colorado Weather Book and the Colorado Weather Almanac. Both books are available from Amazon.com. You can also download a free copy of Mike's newest book, The World's Littlest Book on Climate, for 10 facts in 10 minutes about CO2. Mike and his wife Cindy have two grown children, Christiana and Anders, and two grandsons named Liam and Owen. They are all the parents of two very energetic dogs, Harper and Tallulah. Is that right?
Yep.
And we're very happy to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maggie and Sandy, and to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. Everyone can hear me all right? Okay, and we are recording. What I'd like to do is I have about a 25-minute presentation on climate, the science, and the solutions. And if you would, we'll hold off on questions until afterward. But feel free to jot something down as we go or put it into the chat, and we'll answer the questions at that time. I am part of a task force right now that is part of the American Renewable Energy Institute, which is based in Aspen. And we are trying to promote something called the super grid, which I'll explain as is one of the main solutions I think we can begin to develop right now to decarbonize our economy, even under the current administration. So with that, I'm going to share my presentation with you as soon as I can find it.
Glasses.
Get my glasses on so I can see which one I'm going to show here. There we go.
Yes.
All right, then here we go. So that's how you can get a hold of me. That is my email. It's also in the chat. And we can power our future and lower our carbon emissions. This is a case for the super grid. Now, this is my book, The World's Littlest Book on Climate. You can either use that address and get it, or you can, I will leave this up, use that QR code and scan that for a free download. This book I wrote with Dr. Peter Tons, and our third author is kind of our manager for the project called Michael Banks. Dr. Tons ran the lab at Mauna Loa, and he is my age, in his late 60s, and is probably the most knowledgeable person that I've ever met on atmospheric carbon and the impact of it. He's also brilliant. And so if you say to Peter, can you explain this to me in easy to understand terms? He will think he's doing his darndest to dumb it down, and he'll still be 50 floors above your head. So my job as a broadcaster and storyteller was to take his brilliance and explain things in easy to understand terms, which is exactly what television meteorologists do every single day on TV. We explain to our audience, who are not necessarily scientifically literate, complex things, weather, and we do it in 2.5 minutes using easy to understand terms and storytelling. So that was our goal again with the book. People will say to me, Mike, I've watched you for years. You can't even get tomorrow's forecast right, which is always such a nice compliment. How in the world can you predict what the climate is going to be in 50 or 100 years? Well, very simply, climate is a long-term average of conditions where weather is chaotic and changes rapidly. You would expect that Miami would be warmer than Denver in February because that's the climate of Miami. However, you might go to Miami on a bad week in February when they get a cold front, while Boulder has Chinook winds and 60 degrees, and you're sitting in Miami with rain and 55. Therefore, it is actually easier to predict climate than it is to predict weather. It's basic thermodynamics. If you add heat to something, it gets warmer. That's why day is warmer than night and summer is warmer than winter. An analogy that I oftentimes like to use is that weather is one play in a football game, where climate is the entire history of the National Football League. If it's snowing in Las Vegas or Jerusalem or New Orleans or whatever it might be, well, it's wintertime, folks, and we expect more unusual local weather events as the climate system gains more energy. Global warming creates a steroid effect, and that steroid effect makes droughts more extreme or adds moisture, increasing the rain intensity of a flood event, or adds heat, increasing how quickly a hurricane will intensify. And if you really want to get down to it, global heat balance is even more straightforward. It's like the basic rules of the game. A field goal is 3 points, a touchdown is 6, an extra point is 1 or 2, depending on how you make it. The field is 100 yards long. The heat balance for the planet is so simple. It is heat in versus heat out. So if you have more heat that is coming in that is going out, the world gets warmer. A lot of these pundits and so-called experts that are on talk shows and certain networks that try and make this far too complicated. No, it's that simple. The CO2 is increasing in the atmosphere. It redirects or traps the heat that would escape into outer space. Therefore, the global heat balance is changing and the world is getting warmer. So it's imperative that we must stop lighting fossil carbon on fire as quickly as possible. In the history of our planet, there have been 5 major extinctions, the last one being 65 million years ago. But we are now amidst the 6th great extinction. The difference is we are the ones causing it. You see all of these issues that we face. You will talk about it in your next meeting, talking about groundwater. All of these things are happening, and they're happening because we are giving ourselves self-inflicted wounds. The dinosaurs couldn't stop the asteroid, but human beings can stop what is happening now. So here's a little time perspective. The Earth is 4.6 billion years old. Let's scale that down to just 46 years. 8 months ago, the dinosaurs lived. Human beings have only been there for 4 hours. The Industrial Revolution began 1 minute ago. And in that 1 minute, we have increased the carbon dioxide concentration in our atmosphere by 50%, from 280 parts per million to over 425 parts per million. The rate of that climate change is too fast for many species to adapt. Now, I pay homage to the miracle of fossil fuel because life without it was dark, it was cold, dark, and short. It's concentrated energy from the sun stored in the earth for hundreds of millions of years. Basically, fossil fuel is the original battery storage. And its energy density is what makes it so useful for gasoline and jet fuel and coal to fuel electric power plants. But the rapid increase in demand for electricity means we're going to need new energy resources. We will need every electron we can produce, but with less carbon. You probably have read about this. It's in the paper all the time. After many years of staying fairly level due to increased efficiency, we are now facing a huge increase in the demand for power. Predictions range from about 75 to 125 gigawatts in the next 5 years. By 2030, a gigawatt is the equivalent to a nuclear reactor. We're not going to install 100 nuclear reactors in the next 5 years. So what are we going to do? Well, you hear a lot about carbon sequestration. Let me give you some numbers on that. Carbon sequestration is expensive and it requires a lot of energy. Scrubbing the carbon dioxide from a coal or gas-fired power plant requires that plant be 30% larger, which is not very efficient. The technology is not proven scalable. We currently add globally 100 million tons of carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels every single day. The best hope that we have scaling it up would be $100 a ton to sequester carbon. Currently, we're not even close to that. The best demonstration plants, which are in Iceland because they have geothermal power and porous volcanic soil that they can actually sequester the carbon, is an order of magnitude above that, $1,000 a ton. But let's just say we got to that sweet spot of $100 a ton. That means it would cost $10 billion a day to remove the CO2 we're putting into the atmosphere that very same 24-hour period. We add 2.5 parts per million of CO2 every year, and that unfortunately is getting up higher, not going down. So the numbers say that would cost us $3.65 trillion every single year, not to lower the carbon in the atmosphere, just to stay even with our current emissions. $3.65 trillion. And that's at $100 a ton. So if you do that number at $1,000 a ton, it's $30 trillion a year just to stay even. If you want to know what the cost of carbon really is, what we are allowing the fossil fuel industry to spew into the atmosphere, it's $30 trillion a year. That's their subsidy. So the thing is, folks, it is hard to put the genie back in the bottle. So what are we going to do? Well, with this huge increase in the demand for electricity, we will need all forms of energy to meet the needs of America. We're going to need gas turbines, nuclear, hydro, geothermal, renewable. Power from many different sources. More options ultimately means lower cost for consumers. We need to protect our country's power system. We need to modernize our grid, and we need to provide the power we need for the future. And the AI and data centers are going to mean a huge growth in demand. Now, it's all going to go somewhere, and if we don't take the steps to make this happen here, it will end up being China. To make this happen, we have to build a new modern transmission system, and do it quickly. So let's talk about energy from different sources. You may have heard about enhanced geothermal energy. Matter of fact, Fervo, which is a company that Chris Wright, our energy secretary, has a lot of money invested in, he was on their board of directors, is one of the projects in Utah. There's also Forge, which is a Department of Energy project where they are going to use fracking techniques to break up the hot rocks, creating small fissures that you can then put water into and enhance the creation of steam. The benefit, if you look at that NREL map in the lower right, it's abundant across Colorado and throughout the West, and it's always available. The temperatures are about 440 degrees Fahrenheit. You can then create high pressure steam to spin generators. And the estimates are about 90 gigawatts of generating capacity across the West. That's enough energy for 65 million homes. Battery storage is changing rapidly. Natron is another company that Energy Secretary Chris Wright has stock in. They make their batteries out of sodium ion instead of lithium, and they're manufactured in Michigan. They're safer, they don't catch fire, and they have faster recharge. We were just in California last week, and we were right at Terragen. This is a 4,600-acre solar and battery facility, which is on the north side of Edwards Air Force Base. Because it's a joint private and DoD project, you have to park rather quickly, because when you park your car out there and start taking pictures, pretty soon a guy comes out with a Jeep that has a 50 caliber machine gun on it and says, "What are you doing?" And we say, "Well, we're just interested in energy projects." Well, get out of here. But it is a project that is currently making electricity for Edwards Air Force Base. We are also at the site of Hydrostore last week. There's not much to see that. It's breaking ground this year. It's also near Edwards Air Force Base. And they're going to dig a giant cavern underground where they can store compressed air and then release it to run turbines as a form of a battery. And this will have much more than just a 4-hour storage. It could be up to several days. This is a Canadian company, and if this pilot project works, they could replicate it all over the country. And then there's another company called Form, and they are making their batteries with iron. They're not going to be running in a car or a truck. They're going to sit on the ground. And the advantage is the iron air battery basically just uses rust to create electricity. And then when they recharge it, they get rid of the rust. And they do that process back and forth and back and forth. And they can store energy from hours to days. And certainly we know that iron and air are not rare. How about nuclear? Well, there are some things going on. Small modular nuclear reactors. OCLO, you may have heard of. It's another project that Energy Secretary Chris Wright is on the board of directors for. My goodness, he's a busy man. But nuclear waste storage is still an issue. This would be small modular reactors. Data centers are talking about using them. It would be combined with a gas turbine. And eventually you could replace the gas generation that is now methane or natural gas with decarbonized gas. How about fusion, the power of the stars? Well, we've all been around for a while, and it's expensive and it's limitless power, but the old joke is it's always just 25 years away. We're so close. But they are making great strides. I've read a lot about what they're doing in China and what they're doing in Europe and doing things here as well. If we'd have done a full court press on fusion 30 years ago, we probably would be a lot closer now. How about renewable? Well, that's the one I'm most favorable of because it's reliable on a large enough scale. It's always sunny or windy somewhere. If you take it on a continental scale, renewable energy can solve many of the problems we face. Large-scale battery storage is expanding very fast. We just saw it on a trip out to California last week. But in order to make it work, we have to improve the transmission system so we can move the power from source to need. And ladies and gentlemen, that's where we come to the direct current supergrid. This is the project that I'm on the task force with, and this is the project we need to get in front of our elected officials. This would be the super highway for electricity, taking the vast wind resources we have in the Midwest and the great solar resources we have in the Southwest, and we can move that electricity from source to need. It would be high voltage, direct current underground, much less line loss, so it's way more efficient. and we can use the existing right-of-ways of interstate highways and railroads, which means much less not in my backyard. Instead of tying up these transmission lines in court for decades, we could build this project out by the end of this decade. Advantages: the grid would be protected from solar flares and from the danger of North Korea launching a nuke over Kansas and putting our entire grid out. It would be expensive, $1 trillion, maybe two, but the ROI would be 10 to 15 times. And I will show you examples. Our nation will be safer, cleaner, a leader in a new energy economy, a model for the world. Perhaps this is something that both political parties could actually come together to make a reality. The next great American infrastructure project. This is a map of the petroleum and natural gas pipelines that are currently buried across the United States. Imagine if all of those were 10 feet off the ground. Oh my God. Talk about the NIMBY that everybody would have. But because they're underground, we don't see them. We only think about them when they start leaking. So take a look. These are pictures I took last week on a ranch in California. Beautiful ranch. There's a transmission line moving across that ranch. Pretty easy to see that. But can you see the gas pipeline that's been buried on that ranch since 1960? Let me help you. It's right there. Out of sight, out of mind. If we underground our transmission, we can solve the energy problems we have, and people aren't even going to notice. The owner of the ranch, who was with us on this trip, barely knew where this pipeline was. So here's what it looks like. The cable, the conductor that you see in the upper right, is pure copper, although we can also do it with aluminum or carbon fiber. There's a lot of new technology coming out, and that conductor would be about the size of a baseball. And then you have all the insulation and the conductive tape and the sheath and everything. You bury this about 6 feet underground, or you can also put it underwater using rivers or coastlines. What are the advantages? Well, a massive solar flare, such as the Carrington event in 1859, today would be catastrophic. In 1859, the fledgling telegraph service had lines strung across the United States, just a few, but the electric current caused by the solar flare induced such a high voltage in those lines that the telegraph lines caught fire, and the telegraph offices, the telegraph paper caught fire. Imagine what would happen today. Electricity would be off for many months. A nuclear EMP, electromagnetic pulse, could do the same thing to our power grid. And our lifestyle would go back 150 years. But unfortunately, very few of us know how to live like the pioneers and go hunt our own food and prepare it in that way. All of our commerce would shut down, banking, healthcare, food supply threatened. If we had a shielded underground transmission grid, it would protect us from the worst effects of either a massive solar flare or an EMP. We have had great infrastructure projects in our nation's history. In 1862, Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, signed the Transcontinental Railroad Act. Tremendously expensive for its day, it didn't bankrupt our country, it transformed our nation. And in 1956, Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, signed the Interstate Highway Act, also transforming our nation. I'm going to just swallow back a bit here.
Oh, stop.
Nope. A high voltage direct current supergrid connecting our nation, connecting all of our sources of energy, East, Central Plains, East Coast, West Coast. So President Trump signs the historic Great American Supergrid Project. And his quote can be money and power. This project will bring prosperity and security, making America great. Let me show you some of the advantages to this. The railroads are currently losing their main source of revenue, which has been hauling coal, because despite any efforts to the contrary, coal is a dying form of energy because it's dirty and there are other ones that are vastly cheaper. It will go away. But using their right-of-ways, we would only need 10 feet on the side of the railroad lines. We could bury this cable and create the transcontinental electrical grid, the superhighway, the super grid, and they would gain a new source of revenue, saving their business, and they could also power their trains using the electricity. The Great American Supergrid Project would also help middle and rural America, mostly areas that vote red, because farmers and ranchers could choose to grow electricity on their land, areas that are not as fertile or perhaps on a slope that doesn't hold water very well. They could grow electricity. I'll show you the numbers in a moment. So we could make our nation dominant as the world's greatest producer of all forms of energy, build the grid first, decarbonize it under a friendlier regime in Washington. So let me show you the value of utility scale solar. This is what these solar fields look like out near Edwards Air Force Base in California, and they are everywhere. And the reason that they have come online in the last 15 years is because in the last 15 years, utility scale solar energy has become the cheapest form of energy, about $60 per megawatt hour, far cheaper than nuclear or coal. So let's take a look and run some numbers. At $60 per megawatt hour of power, that would be about $1,440 for 24 hours. Simple mathematics. Yeah. And about $500,000 for 1 megawatt for a year. Now, through my research and in talking with NREL, it takes about 5 acres of solar panels and batteries and access roads and fencing and inverters, etc., per megawatt. So if you had that for 12 hours of sun, that's $50 million. That's 8 hours of sun and 4 hours of battery storage. Do the numbers. The value of that crop, if you will, is $50,000 per acre per year. So what else could I grow if I was a farmer that'd be even close to that? Well, I went ahead and I asked ChatGPT and DeepSeek, and I took an average. Soybeans, an acre is worth about $700. Corn, about $1,000. Alfalfa hay, $2,000. If I had trees once in my life, I could harvest them for $3,000 or $4,000. Pistachios in California are $5,000. Almonds are $6,000. Oranges are $10,000. So I said, Cindy, what else could I ask that's expensive? And you said
Saffron.
saffron, the most expensive spice in the world, is worth $30,000 per acre. So solar farming at $50,000 per acre per year, and you never have to plant it again, is very profitable. And look at this. Alfalfa hay is the biggest water user in the Western United States. By far, solar farming uses almost no water. Once in a while, you go out and clean off the solar panels. So let me show you what infrastructure means, because building the supergrid would be building infrastructure. And there is a case study in this. We're going to go to the Antelope Valley north of Los Angeles. And this is what it looked like back in 2008. You can see where the city of Lancaster is, and Edwards Air Force Base, where Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier and where the space shuttle first landed. Well, out here in the central part of it, that's all agricultural land. You see some crop circles here. But due to climate change, this land was becoming less and less productive because it was too hot and too dry. Well, California built 2 transmission lines, the Tehachapi transmission line and the Barren Ridge. And they spent $3.6 billion to build those transmission lines because they wanted to bring solar energy and wind energy down to Los Angeles. If you build it, they will come. So inside that orange rectangle, watch what happened after they put in the infrastructure. Watch that slide very carefully. Oops. It's all solar fields in there.
Mhm.
Thousands of acres of solar fields. And the people making that investment, that $60 billion, well, First Solar, that's Warren Buffett. Amazon, Google, Duke Energy, a coal company. EDF Renewables, a French company. Masdar is the United Arab Emirates, a petro state building solar fields. So let me show you an example of what this does. This is Big Bow Solar, and that's what it looks like. That is a massive solar field, and it's the first one that actually included solar panels and battery storage. So this is what it looks like. This is an assessor's parcel map. Every one of those rectangles is a parcel of land that somebody owned. This area up there, this is not pristine desert. This has been subdivided and owned for generations. It's flat, and it had very little value thanks to climate change. That's what it looks like. It's flat, it's dry, and it's very sunny. So every one of those parcels of land had to be acquired by EDF and Masdar to build their solar field. So this was a 10-acre parcel of land that an investor bought out there just as a way to hopefully make some money. And they bought that land for $20,000 in 2013, knowing that because of those utility poles, those transmission lines, it might become valuable. And they sold it 7 years later for $16,000 an acre. That is a 700% return on investment in 7 years. If you know of the rule of 72, at 4%, it would take you 50 years to make a 700% return on investment. Why do I bring this up? Because brown fields are areas of land that are blighted. They're landfills, they're former power plants, things you can't really use very well. Well, we have 5 million acres of brownfield in the United States. Just 1 million acres of brownfield land would produce 200 gigawatts, 200 nuclear power plants per year. And the value of that at $60 per gigawatt hour would be $50 billion a year. If we built the transmission system, we could utilize these marginal lands. Transmission lines make the marginal land valuable and productive. So, my friends, we can solve our growing power needs and save our environment and create a great deal of wealth. So, I'll finish with John F. Kennedy, who in 1960 said, "We stand today on the edge of a new frontier, a frontier of unknown opportunities and perils. It would be easier to shrink back from that new frontier, but the times demand new invention, innovation, imagination, and decision. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings." And my friends, we got to the moon by the end of the decade. We can do this. What we need is the leadership in Washington to make the direct current underground supergrid the next great American infrastructure project.
Wow. That sounds really amazing. Do we have questions in the chat, Barb?
Sure, we can discuss geoengineering. Geoengineering, much like carbon sequestration, is a little scary to me because we're already making a really bad experiment with our atmosphere by spewing 100 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every single day. I don't know where we might go with that. For instance, I'll give the small example of cloud seeding, because cloud seeding does work. And you can shoot silver iodide up in a rocket, or have a little burner on the ground that will send the particles up into the air. A friend of mine did this back in the 1970s out in California for the California Power and Light Company, because they would go up and seed the clouds in the Sierra to increase the snowpack, which eventually would melt down to give them more hydropower opportunities in the spring and summer. And the reason that it worked is that the air that comes in off the Pacific is very, very clean. And it doesn't have a lot of little tiny particles for the nuclei, the snowflakes, to condense around. So by adding nuclei into the atmosphere, you can increase the amount of snowflakes. And it did work. It adds about 10% more snowpack. They have done this in Colorado as well. But the problem is, if you are Vail and you do that, then you steal Copper Mountain snow. And if you're Copper, then you steal Breckenridge's snow. And that can lead to all kinds of legal issues. So if we start on a global scale trying to seed the atmosphere with particles to block out incoming sunlight, does that change the weather to another nation? Does that lead us to war? There's all kinds of bad things that can happen. Do you remember the margarine ad back in the 70s when she'd go, "It's not nice to fool Mother Nature," and then she'd go like that, there'd be a bolt of lightning? That's kind of the way I feel about geoengineering. Could do it, yeah, but tread carefully.
Elizabeth Colbert wrote a book a couple of years ago that was titled Under White Skies. And the idea of giving up our blue skies for a steady amount of white skies going on and on and on sounds pretty bad to me.
Yeah. Now I see Mary has asked, is the current administration looking at the super grid at all?
That's the $1,000,000 question.
Who knows? No, what we're trying to do with this task force is get it in front of Chris Wright if we can. Clearly we've thought if we can get Elon to say this is a good idea, and et cetera. So yes, we are trying to get there. Getting their attention is not easy because they're so into everything else, but we're working on it. We have a whole group. We meet every Thursday. Just met with them this morning for an hour and a half, and we are trying to get this out in front of them. I have that presentation.
Tell us about your group.
Pardon me?
Tell us about your group.
It's the Super Grid Task Force, and in the group, Sandy McDonald, who is the author of a book called Transformation. It's a manuscript currently. It's not in publication. Sandy was the head of NOAA and the president of the American Meteorological Society, and he has created this entire study done that shows we have enough resources of wind and solar and gas as a backup, eventually decarbonized gas as a backup, wind, solar, batteries, and gas, that we can do this. We can power our nation's needs, but we need to have the super grid built first to do it. So in the current administration, where the words climate change are a non-starter, if we can present the whole idea of money and power to them and say, build this and we will have the energy for all the data centers, we can compete with China, all, etc. But we can't do any of this if we don't have the super grid first. We can decarbonize it in future administration.
So
I have a question. Have you talked to organizations like RMI with your proposal?
I would much appreciate a contact.
Okay, I can send you one.
Okay.
So who else is in the group?
Oh, well, let's see.
Shirley, somebody.
Okay. Hang on.
He needs his glasses.
Yep. In the group, we have Sandy McDonald, we have Trammell Crow, and Trammell is, I don't know if you've heard of EarthX. That's a big thing coming up in Dallas next month, and we will be attending in Dallas. Chip Cummins is the head of the American Renewable Energy Institute. We have Allie Kelly. I don't know if you've heard of something called the Ray, which is down in Georgia. Look up theray.org. And the Ray is actually a demonstration project of they have done a highway that has all of
Oh,
the utilities and solar energy, et cetera, built into the highway. Fascinating. I can get a list of all of the people that are involved in the task force, and I will get that out to Maggie.
That'd be great.
Because if anyone has any ideas or you'd like to audit one of our Thursday meetings,
You have connections?
and yet we just need the connections to get this out in front of people because it truly could be a bipartisan project that, for lack of, it would be a great thing for our country and our
have you
future.
gotten any interest from any of the senators or representatives?
Well, we're trying to get an audience with Hickenlooper and
And
with,
Eric.
Damn
yeah,
And-
yeah,
But also
and Bennett.
Eric.
And Eric, oh, and you may not know of Eric Sorensen. Have you heard of this gentleman at all? Eric Sorensen is the representative from the 17th District in Illinois, and he is the first and only meteorologist, broadcast meteorologist that's in Congress. He first was elected in 2020. He was reelected, no, 2022, I guess, reelected this past November. And he's a longtime friend of mine. And so Eric is aware of this project as well. And so we have fledgling support, but we need to ramp it up.
Have you talked with Bill Ritter at all?
Yes, Bill is,
Ironic.
yeah, Bill and Chip Cummins are actually quite good friends, and Bill is aware of this project as well. So,
So she wants to know about this one. that's-
Mary's asking about crypto and
Slowing down the.
well, it's interesting that DeepSeek apparently came out with a program that's way more efficient than ChatGPT. So who knows what might happen? My biggest concern is that China is so far ahead of us. Well, I've gotten for years pushback when people say, "Yeah, well, China's building coal-fired power plants, blah blah blah." They don't realize that BYD is the world's largest car manufacturer and they make cars that are better than Tesla. You just can't buy them here, and they're far cheaper. And there is another company called CATL, which is the world's largest battery manufacturer. China is about to absolutely eat our lunch if we don't wake up and realize that they're putting the largest solar field in the United States being built right now. It's 8,300 acres, and it's also north of Edwards Air Force Base. That's the largest in the United States. China has a couple of them already done that are 3 times that size.
I understand they have, they're working on battery chargers that are really fast for cars.
Yeah, they charge in 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yeah.
5 minutes. So it's like filling up your car.
Yeah. 100 years ago, maybe 110, I guess 120, only rich people owned automobiles until Henry Ford invented the Model T. And all of a sudden, there was a transformation within a decade. Now, for the most part, only rich people own electric cars because they're more expensive. BYD makes a beautiful car that costs like $13,000.
And it has AI in it so that it not only is going to learn while you're saying, this is my temperature control I like. This is the temperature I like in my car. So it'll do that temperature every time you get in the car. Or it'll have all the exterior as well. And these are beautiful and they are well-made cars.
Hmm.
You have a bunch of questions here.
Yeah,
John.
let's go on to Rocky Mountain Institute. Yep, yep.
Okay, good.
And NVIDIA have made their GPUs 600 times more powerful and using 10,000 times less. Yeah, that hopefully happens because all of this stuff with these data centers, we are going to be so screwed as far as the amount of carbon we're going to put in the atmosphere in the next 10 years that we may well forget the 1.5 degrees C. We'll blow way past that, and we'll blow well past 500 parts per million in carbon in the atmosphere, which will stay there for 1,000 years and will cook the planet for that amount of time too. So we are in dire straits right now.
They call anything over 480 the death zone. So once we get into the 400s, into pushing into like 450, you're going to really notice the heat that you have in the atmosphere.
Remember when they started with 350?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when Cindy and I moved here in 1991 and we built our first house, the realtor said, "Do you want air conditioning? Because a lot of people have traditionally not had air conditioning." I doubt there's anybody that builds a house today in Denver that they ever ask that question, because it used to be maybe we'd get one day of 100-degree heat in a summer. A lot of summers we never even had one. And with the way we're going right now, we will be looking at perhaps 20 triple-digit days by 2050 and 40 triple-digit days here in Denver by the end of this century. And Rocky Mountain National Park will have 100-degree temperatures in Estes Park. I mean, our climate will be more like that of northern Mexico if we don't stop this.
New Mexico,
I really wonder whether it won't be faster than that.
Oh, I think it will.
Alice, I agree with you, because every prediction I've seen from the climate experts has been that if anything, we've been way too conservative. I mean, this is a much greater emergency. But the reason I've greatly changed, and Cindy's watched all my PowerPoint presentations for years on climate, we're not going to get anywhere in the next 4 years by going to this administration with the words climate change.
Right.
We have to go with energy dominance. And the way we're going to achieve energy dominance is by building the supergrid. So if there's one thing we can accomplish in this current nightmare, it's going to be, can we get them to agree to build this bit of infrastructure, this project?
What company is producing the cable?
There are enough. I mean, that's the other part. When you bring in the construction part of this, the cable companies, that will be creating all of this. This is a huge moneymaker for so many businesses. And it's an American infrastructure project that you can get the hawks on the one side. This is going to protect us from a terrorist act. And you can get the greenies on the other side, say we can decarbonize our grid and use renewable energy. And Steve, you had a question.
Yeah, I might have missed it, but and I might be wrong, but don't you have a good example with Sprint? Aren't they Southern Pacific Railroad originally? And didn't they use that as an infrastructure corridor for their telecommunications, their fiber optics? Is that correct? And can you use that as an example?
Yeah, fiber optic's a great example, because again, if all that fiber optic was above ground, people would hate it. But it's buried and you don't see it. The one that's the current project is called the Sioux Green Line. And that is a buried cable, direct current, taking wind energy from Iowa into Chicago. So if you do a little search on the Sioux Green Line, you can find that as well.
Oh, cool.
Is copper going to be a problem?
Well, it'll take a lot of copper or aluminum to do this. So, I mean, it's going to be a project that will take resources. But again, this cable is not that big when you consider what a transmission cable above ground is about that same size.
I have a few comments. One, copper will be a problem just in that we mostly mine copper. Well, we mostly mine a lot of things in Africa, and unfortunately we don't have the proper oversight there. And like a lot of the African countries also are very rich in biodiversity and forests that sequester carbon. So that is actually a really big concern, like making sure I work on like more environmental science and environmental policy, and the US can do some things like if you ask your senators to have more transparency and accountability with the organizations that are working over there. But it's definitely something to keep your eye on. Also, if anyone doesn't know what the IPCC is, they do a big report that tells you it breaks down all the things you could want to know about climate. I mean, they maybe you guys already know this, but they give the report to all the heads of countries. It's dozens of country scientists that work together to put together this report, and they are always saying, I mean, for like this last several reports, their reports are optimistic, And B, our climate goals are not aligning with our policies right now. Like we're just not going to get there with the current policies, unfortunately. And then my third comment is like, I think that, yeah, the economy for green energy will hopefully like win the battle here. But the problem with this administration is that they like the super PACs that contributed to Trump's administration were fossil fuel companies. They contributed millions and millions of dollars. He's hired oil executives and people who have interest in fossil fuel energy to head things like the Department of the Interior and the EPA and stuff. So like even if it's economically viable, I mean like they're doing that because they know that they're going to lose. Like to me it seems like oil's last big like push
Oh,
to like
agreed.
hold on to their power, which is honestly so stupid. Like you could just invest in renewable energy. Like why are you doing it this way? But
So
anyway.
Jessica, just to give you some hope, because there are really intelligent people out there still in charge, and that would be like Newsom in California. And we keep bringing up California because we also work in California. There's a lot going on out there, and so they have made sure that Trump is not going to be able to tell them what to do. And even Texas has been going nuts with wind and solar, and they are going forward whether he's going to subsidize or not. And so Maine is massively huge in solar, and we could go on and on. And so we have individual states that are saying, listen, you can't tell us what to do. And we are going to continue on because we have goals that we believe in. And I think it's so important. I just read today, 71% of every blue county gives more money and more infrastructure to our country than any other thing. And it's like, we can't be stopped with those kind of numbers, right? I mean, we have to like really try and keep steady and keep doing it.
Yeah, Newsom he was really clever. Like when he was making those contracts with Canada and the automobile companies, like I don't know if you guys know this, but man, that was some forward thinking. Because
Yep.
I mean, those car companies, they're not done like they have people that are in charge of forecasting. Like they know that people want electric cars, so it makes sense for them to just follow the regulations. When they were talking about going back on the regulations, the oil or the car companies actually asked them not to do that because they are already investing in electric vehicles. So like, I mean, especially with people being more focused on voting with their money now, I think we might actually get somewhere.
I
Yeah.
hope so, because and then the other piece I was going to say is in California, they've got 50% more chargers than they do in gas station pumps. I couldn't think of the word.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And all
Really?
our new
That's
infrastructure,
amazing.
That is amazing.
25% of the parking, if you have 100 parking spots, the
They have
laws
a
are
lot,
now that you have to have 25
Wow.
Wow.
of those be available for electric charging.
Yes.
Yep,
And it goes up exponentially after that.
yep.
So it's just all kinds of things. And when we went to a meeting here in Aurora, one of the things we talked about was the water. Why are you building new homes and not using gray water? Why are we using chlorinated water to
Keep the lawn green.
keep our lawns green? And they literally said, because we can't tell them what to do. And I just called BS on that because I was like, you've got to be kidding me. These are the same builders that are in California being told you cannot put chlorinated water out there. It has to be gray water, and you have to have solar on your house, and they build them with chargers in the garage automatically now.
You know, some of this stuff can be fought for in local elections too, because
Oh yeah.
like simple things, no HOA in Colorado should be legally allowed to encourage or require green lawns or pesticide use, like Roundup. Like the amount of HOAs that I've seen, like celebrating Roundup. I'm just like, are you serious right now? Like you should
Yeah.
not be, even just from a selfish standpoint, you should not be doing this, you know?
Agreed.
Or like requiring new buildings to have like, I don't know what to call it. You can basically design them to like recycle the heat. Like you have a gap and it creates convection in your house, or you can keep them cool by doing like positioning them properly, doing smart things with the windows, like those kinds of things can be fought for locally too. So
Yep, that's all low hanging fruit too.
Very
That stuff can
low-hanging.
all be done. And you're so right about the grassroots level. Um, because it's not, I mean, our friend who's in Congress is great, but he also said, it's not just getting to the US House of Representatives, run for mayor, be on the city council. All of those things can make a difference. And our broadcast profession is going through some real struggles right now. But at our next conference, I'm going to talk to a lot of these younger broadcast meteorologists who are generally, they're attractive, well-spoken, easy to listen to. Run for office. If the TV job's not working out for you, get into politics.
This
You're
is
a
what
scientist.
That's
We need
exactly
more
what I'm trying to
scientists.
do. Yeah. Because a lot of people I see, it's like, I was previously working on an app to like show people collective action. So basically you register, it uses life cycle analysis to give you like real data about how you're impacting the environment with your choices. So then you can get points for riding your bike to work, and it gives you like actual real like points based on like your actual impact. And then you see it in your neighborhood and you see your number grow in your local community, and then it makes people not be oh collective action, I can't see it, is it even real? And I've been going out, I think about collective action a lot because a lot of people don't believe in it, and a lot of people feel helpless, and that's why they're just kind of frozen. So I've been going out and I'm like, they're like, oh, well, we can't do anything. We can't vote right now. And I'm like, you can do stuff. You can write ballot initiatives.
Well,
You can
we
talk
need more
science.
young people like you out there.
I will tell you another
I'm
thing
working
is
on
there's
it.
an app, there's an app out there called 5Calls.
Yeah.
CALLS. Excellent. People say, I don't know what to do. I'm like, get that app. They'll tell you exactly who to call, what to say, and they're your elected officials. They're not the other states.
Exactly. And I'm
One of
like,
the
look, you
things,
can
Five
do
calls a day.
one of the things that has been kind of a sore thing for me has been that the other meteorologists in our state on TV don't seem to ever talk about this problem.
Talk about that.
I hope that might be it.
When I left Channel 7, I said to all four of my colleagues that are
Wow.
currently there, I said, please make this old man happy when I'm watching you and talk about climate change once in a while. I don't need the brunch forecast. I can figure out if tomorrow is 70 degrees, it's going to be nice for brunch. Take that 30 seconds and point out the carbon dioxide number and talk about it. And so
But also explain why they don't.
they're
Many
afraid.
I
of them.
understand, it's probably because they can't.
Well,
No.
here's what happens. There are fewer of them, but they're grumpy old guys mostly that write to you and say, now you're politicizing the weather report and I'm not going to watch you anymore. And they'll send a copy of that to the news director and the general manager, which is bullying. And they're trying to scare you into not talking about climate change because you'll get an angry text or phone message or email. And I didn't care because, I've known for 40 years what was going on, but it really struck home after we had our grandchildren. It's like, this is a world that is not going to be friendly to them when they're our age. And so I happily took the grumpy guys and would talk back to them a little bit through an email or whatever. But younger people that are in their 30s and 40s and maybe have little kids of their own and they're not that well known in the market and they get a nasty gram like that and they think, oh, I better not talk about this. I don't want to lose my job.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. And it's like, no, I will tell you that every time I talked about climate change, I had 10 attaboys for every dumb shit.
I was one of them, Mike. I sent you an email thanking you
Yes.
for
Thank you.
putting that on your
now I
broadcast.
recognize you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you very
Seriously,
much for
thank you.
doing
Yeah.
that. And I'm
Well-
seeing it still on the screen.
Yeah.
And I would also go so far as to say that if you want to hear about it, you should let these news directors and general managers know you want to hear about it, because then they will say to them, we need you to start doing what Mike did. Talk about it.
I mean, they
And
have
we
the-
will
they have the
support you no
perfect
matter what.
Pulpit for it.
Yeah.
It's just perfect. They got your attention and they can tell you why it's so warm.
Yep. Well, you may not have heard the last of me, so that's a story for another day, though. But
What can we do to help you?
well,
Nothing at the moment.
Maggie, if I may use you as the conduit to the group.
Yep.
All right, I will send out more information about our supergrid group, and I will send send to you an essay that Sandy McDonald has written that has already appeared in The Hill in Washington about the supergrid, and my essay, which is hopefully going to be soon in The Hill about the supergrid. And any help that you guys have on suggestions, contacts, please share.
And by the
Well,
way, Jan Brown, you asked, is California using agrivoltaics? Yes, they are.
The agrivoltaics are exciting as heck because they're providing shade. They're generating electricity, but also providing shade so that you can grow things underneath, and you can get them up high enough that you can run farm equipment underneath. It's
Or
very
animals.
exciting. Yeah. Or graze sheep underneath. It's fabulous.
Have you visited Jack's Solar Garden?
What is
No.
that?
Where's
You
Jack's
need
Solar?
to do that. It's in Longmont.
Okay.
And it was the original agrivoltaics in this country, I think. And it is sponsored by CU, CSU. All the garden clubs have got plots. This is the most fascinating tour you will ever take. It is absolutely wonderful. They graze sheep underneath there. They grow flowers. They grow vegetables, and they donate it to the community.
I love it. How do we get a tour?
You just call them up. It's called Jack's Solar Garden.
Okay.
And you just call them up, and they'd love to tour you. I know they would. And sometimes they charge a fee, and sometimes they don't. If you whine that you're old and you can't afford it, they won't charge you a fee. And it's great.
Okay.
We're little old people on Soch.
Yeah. We are that. Yeah, we are that.
Now,
Peter-
Mike, I have another question. What would
Yeah.
you do with the Suncor refinery?
What would I do with it?
Yeah.
We just drove past it yesterday twice. It was awful.
Awful.
Geez, I feel so bad for the people that live downwind from that, because this is the other part of all of this. It is the people that have the least that are being impacted the most, and these neighborhoods that are near the ports that are near the refineries, and then the horrible stuff that's going on with these huge liquefaction factories on the coast of Louisiana.
Awful.
I mean, they are destroying that state is pretty compromised thanks to the petrochemical industry anyway, but these things are massive and scary as hell. And it's hard work to make natural gas into a liquid, and you release all kinds of noxious stuff and the risk of explosions. And it's just awful.
People will die.
People will die.
They've been, Suncor in Denver has been cited thousands of times.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
nobody has gone to jail because we don't have any. This is the main thing that I don't like in our laws is the lack of accountability. Like even NEPA, people say it's the Magna Carta of environmental law, and I have done like deep policy analysis of it. The most important thing is it provides a space for the public to talk. Other than that, it doesn't have any jail time. It doesn't have any punishments. Mitigation is not required. You have to write it down. That's it. And like if we can get the accountability part, that's the part I work on.
Yeah. Well, again,
On that
Just
point,
the cost of doing business, basically.
on that point, the League of Women Voters supported the group that got some kind of air monitoring stations at Suncor in the area. So that's, an issue that we know of. I'm wondering, because you need to go into discussions of this kind, and it's very positive, and I'm probably 99% behind you. But we do need to know the downsides so that we can address those issues.
Oh, boy.
And that's my question.
the downside on building the supergrid.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't see one.
It'll
Is that
take a
hard
lot
for
of
you to
copper.
come up with?
It'll take a lot of copper. It'll be expensive.
It will cost probably $2 trillion.
Yeah.
But the return on investment that we could make from this in making decarbonizing our grid and making our electric grid, which is so critical. I mean,
It's archaic.
modern and resilient. I think that there's not an environmental downside because you use the railroad and interstate highway right of ways. And so it's just digging the trench and burying the cable.
And the easements are smaller
And the
than
easements,
doing.
if you try and put in transmission lines above ground, you need about 300 feet of easement on each side of that, 600 feet. To put this along a railroad, you need 10 feet.
I will
Well-
say there are some concerns with habitat fragmentation because if you have to go into all these places at once and start doing construction, I work on a lot of habitat corridor planning, and that is definitely something that people need to pay attention to because especially as the climate warms, it's hard for us to predict where the animals want to go, and some of them will go extinct if they cannot move.
Oh,
Sure, absolutely. Yep.
Well, one of the problems with the present grid and expanding it, we're running into in Colorado already, and you might want to speak to that. The situation down in southern Colorado, that where the ranchers are fighting, putting a line through, even though it's needed.
Mhm.
But there's quite a bit of opposition, and my congressperson is supporting them in saying they don't want it. Basically, that's Lauren Boebert. Yeah, I'm sure you're aware of that situation.
Yeah, and that's why undergrounding takes so much of this not in my backyard away. And using existing right of way would ease a lot of that, which if you tie it all up in litigation, you won't get a transmission line built for decades.
Mhm.
I think
Well,
also appealing to farmers is going to help. Like a lot of farmers are already trying to do regenerative farming and things like that because they see that their crops are being threatened by climate change. And so some of them are starting to not be in a position to ignore it. And some of them clearly are still in the ignoring phase. But once they realize we have to decarbonize and it's to their own benefit, I think it might be a little bit easier for them to agree.
Jessica, I've found so often that if you go out and talk to farmers and ranchers and you don't use the C word, but use the W word and say, tell me how the weather's changing.
Yep.
Oh, then I'll start, when I was a kid, we would have ice on the pond and they'll go to great length talking about stuff. As long as you don't bring up climate, they
Yeah,
just,
you literally just have to reframe. It's the same with a lot of right-wing people who are hunters. So easy to change their mind because they require good, healthy ecosystems. Ducks Unlimited alone has protected so much of Wisconsin's wetlands, like little stuff like that. Like you just gotta you gotta figure out the right angle. I think a lot of people get frustrated because a lot of people on the left are educated, which means that they can take scientific information and internalize it and accept it. But we're dealing with emotional people. Like you cannot, people are so frustrated, like, why you don't listen to facts? Oh, these are just facts. They're not, that's not the land they're living in. They're living in emotional land. You have to make emotional arguments that are targeted to what they care about. And so like the quicker the left stops trying to just like shoot facts down people's throats or whatever, like we're gonna be a lot better off.
yeah.
are there
Jessica, are
more
you here in
questions on the
Colorado or where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Golden.
Okay, okay. You spoke of Wisconsin and that's where, of course, we're from. So,
Oh, I didn't know that. I just love wetlands and I have recently read a few books on wetlands, so I just happen to know that. And also I've been plotting to convince the right.
It's hard. It's hard.
Are there questions on
Well,
the chat?
Yeah, anything else anybody wants to ask? Mike, it's been great. This is a total new revelation for us. We didn't even know about this, at least I didn't.
yeah, well, happy to share more and let's see if we can get something done.
Yeah, this
May
is-
Lots of
Ask a
wonderful.
question.
Sure, Tony.
Yes,
Do you know about the transmission piece of legislation that's in the state legislature at this point?
No.
Okay, well, there is a bill that I think it's improving the transmission.
Do you know who the sponsor is?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay, well, you have my email. If anybody has any more information on that, I would love to know more and perhaps that's somebody that I should be talking to.
Yeah, yeah, I can get you his, I think it's the name and the number of the bill.
Yeah, okay.
The sponsor of that bill is Cleve Simpson.
Oh, and he's a farmer in the south, in the southern part.
From San Luis Valley,
Alamosa.
and also Dylan Roberts.
Dylan Roberts.
Yeah, he's on the
I
west.
got rid of it.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I heard it.
The bill was stripped down. It went through its first committee. It passed, but there was a strike
Oh,
below,
I get out of it.
and it was greatly stripped down, but it's still alive. So either of those two people would probably be good to contact.
Great information. Thank you, Ann.
Because
Is
we
this-
do have an agency in the state called the Colorado Electric Transmission Authority that is working on this, but not as aggressively as you are, I think.
Well,
I
and
believe
if I'm
Cleve
not
spoke to us
mistaken,
last year, and he was talking about doing some of the growing the crops under the solar panels. He thought that was a
But-
good idea. And
Well, this bill is about expanding our electric transmission capacity in the state.
did the league finally take a position on it? We've
We
discussed.
did. We supported. I
We supported.
testimony yesterday.
Great.
Can I just say how much I appreciate the blue book that comes out every year from you guys?
We don't turn out the blue book.
No, when you
Pamphlet.
send something to us every time we go to vote, there's something from the
Yes.
League of Women Voters, and I always say, I would be lost without this. And I just
Yes.
want you guys to know how much I appreciate it.
We appreciate you for saying that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, both Cindy and Mike. This has been fantastic.
If you ever
And,
want, get a bigger group or new people and they get excited and they want to hear it, we can make that happen for you.
Great.
Okay.
We'll certainly keep you in mind. We have programs every year. And this has been fantastic. I'm sorry that more people didn't tune in. We thought we had quite a few.
Oh, we
But,
did have
28,
28, I think.
Well, we
Yeah.
could advertise it.
28. Yeah.
We could advertise it and see if we can't get some people listening to recording.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There you
that'd
go.
be good.
That's
Happy to chat again sometime. It's been delightful to be with all of you, and thank you for your work and your interest. And I'll just leave it with this. We can still fix this.
That's
We
good.
have to.
Good to hear. Thank
Yes.
you again. And
Okay.
Take care.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening,
good
everybody.
evening.